What's happening, Panda Nation? Peter Von Panda here. I want to talk to you today about a situation that came up. My baby, Theo, caught COVID, and I thought I would tell you the story here because I think a lot of people, especially a lot of parents, wonder about this. I think we are aware, and I will say that anything I say here is my own opinion because YouTube has its policies regarding COVID and the information that you share. This is purely anecdotal, and I am not a medical professional, so please keep that in mind. But Theo did catch COVID, and I want to tell you a couple things here. First of all, he is 15 months old. He is a male, and he is slightly larger than average. He's in about the 91st percentile in terms of height and weight, and that's actually slowing down. He was in 99th for a while, born 9 pounds, 5 ounces. But he is now getting much closer to where he should be in terms of averages. I think he is 27 pounds at 15 months, which makes him a little heavy, but he's pretty average. I would just say that when people ask, people who are knowledgeable kids, they have their own or have had their own, a lot of people will be like, what is he, 16 months, 17 months, 18 months? And they're just a few months off. So that seems to me pretty close because honestly, when he was like 8 or 9 months and he was in the 99th percentile, people would be like, oh, what is he, like a 2-year-old? And that always made me laugh. So I'm not sure if the size and his gender makes any difference, but I'm going to leave that up to you. But I will also say that he has been vaccinated on the regular schedule or the CDC recommended one. So I don't know what it is. Measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox. I don't know. I actually don't know what's in them. The only thing I know is at the time when they were doing the vaccinations, and it's a couple rounds of vaccinations, I think after a few weeks, I actually specifically asked if the COVID vaccine was in there. And they said it wasn't, and they asked, did I want it? And I said no. I specifically and intentionally avoided the COVID vaccine for all sorts of reasons. I'm seeing information anecdotally that it might cause myocarditis and inflamed heart and other things. And as far as I can tell, infants, kids, children that catch COVID seem to bounce back from it fairly well. So again, these are just my experiences, but I wanted to give you that background because if you have a baby that's more of an aberration or a toddler that is different, you might have different results. You might have a baby that seems to be very similar to my Thebes, and he or she might have very different results. So don't base it on this. I just want to tell you exactly what happened. My in-laws basically babysit him during the day. It just helps me out. I work from home, but I generally need to get stuff done. So I have an office where I kind of lock myself away. My wife is a school teacher, so she is gone early in the morning to early afternoon. And one of those days, my mother-in-law was watching Theo, and she said she didn't feel great. And I actually said, well, you should just go home. I'll take care of him that day. No, I'm just going to push through. I think it's allergies, no big deal. So she actually stayed till about 3 o'clock when my wife got home, and then she went home right away, and then she slept, and then she called us later that night that she was feeling very sick and that she wouldn't be in tomorrow, no problem. She was going to take the day off, great. And then the next morning, apparently she was throwing up and she felt super sick, so went to the doctor, got a test, and had COVID. So that's when we found out that he had been exposed. I had been exposed because I come out for lunch and see them when I grab coffee and all that jazz. So I know exactly where it came from, and we know his first exposure too. And what I would say is that he wasn't showing symptoms, obviously, the first day. Now, I have heard that people are infectious kind of going into symptoms as opposed to post symptoms. So my guess is that me and him specifically had been exposed probably maybe even a couple days before this because she babysits him every Monday through Friday, morning to early afternoon. And what he and I both did is we actually both caught COVID. Now, I'm not going to go over my situation. It was quite a bit different than his, but not overly dramatic either. So I'm very lucky that it seemed like seasonal allergies to me or more like a sinus infection, but I never had flu-like symptoms. But I don't think the actual days are relevant here, but I'm going to give you them in chronological order. So I'm just going to call them day 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, just because the actual days don't really matter. All right. He was exposed probably a couple days later. So I'm going to call this day 1 of any symptoms. And so it was actually fairly late at night. We were going to bed and my wife's asleep and I'm going to bed at 10 or 11. And I hear the baby monitor and Theo is crying. Now, Theo does not normally cry. He's a tough kid. He doesn't like crying. He actually has a fake cry because this forced cry when he's hungry. but he has a real cry when he's in pain. And so this was a real cry. Now, I actually wasn't sure if he was having some sort of separation anxiety, which would have been the first time, but he was crying in his crib. And so I went down and I picked him up. And actually, what kind of dawned on me was maybe he's hungry. Maybe we didn't feed him enough and now he's having some hunger pangs. And so I actually gave him a few ounces of milk. So that's our easy go-to, is a few ounces of milk in a bottle because it's easy to make. And he drank that and went to sleep. He woke up again crying. And then I went back down to that room and he seemed to relax when he saw me and wasn't crying, but obviously was truly crying, runny nose, tears, those types of things. So when I left again, he started crying again. So what I ended up doing was just sleeping in his room that night, because as long as I was there, he didn't seem to cry. And so that just made me think, at least, that it was just an emotional thing as opposed to a physical thing. Now, what I realized in retrospect is that his body must have been achy, and not in a way that was super painful, but painful enough that, like, when you and I are sick or flu or achy or have a fever or something like that, you just don't feel good. And he was looking probably for some relief, but it wasn't so bad that he kept on crying. Now, the next morning I woke up and he was crying and not particularly hungry. Now, I will also say I have a few baby thermometers, the old school ones that just are mercury. I have a bunch of the digital ones because we had them around the house, and as first-time parents, maybe a little overzealous on that stuff. But he was not feverish, but I knew obviously he had been exposed to COVID. So now I'm thinking, all right, he is on the downslope of catching COVID and he's going to have some symptoms. And this is kind of when I first realized that this is maybe what he had. So he's crying. He's not really eating. I actually give him some of his favorite foods. Again, he doesn't really eat much of it. Not feverish at all, but very sleepy. And so I let him sleep. And then when he does wake up, I realize that probably around mid-morning, and again, like I've been told here that my in-laws aren't going to babysit, so I know I'm on deck for the next few days. And because she gets her COVID diagnosis, I know that I'm probably going to babysit for a week or two. So he's sleepy. He usually does not wake up and go back to sleep until kind of lunchtime, but he went back to sleep around 8:30, woke up around 10, and I noticed at around 10:30, he was showing a little bit of a temperature. Not a lot, but an elevated temperature. So he was showing about 99 degrees. Normally it's about 98 on the digital thermometer, but anything over 99 starts showing me a little elevated temp, and he's fussing. And so I give him 1.5 milliliters. I think I'm measuring these right. 1.5 milliliters of baby Tylenol. It's kind of like this cherry liquid Tylenol. You put in this little injector and you squirt it in their mouth and they take it. He does not like it, but he takes it. I don't know why. He hates it, but he swallows it. I don't know why babies just don't spit it out. I give him that, and I'm not sure how long it takes to work, but he's sleeping. He's fussing a little bit, but by 1 o'clock, I am giving him the thermometer again because he feels hot, and it's saying 101.1. So now he's definitely showing a temperature in the afternoon, right around kind of like late lunchtime. So I talked to my wife. She talks to the pediatrician, and she gets an appointment for 4 o'clock. And she's going to take him as soon as she gets home because I am also feeling under the weather. I have clearly the signs of, I wouldn't call it COVID, but I'll just call it like seasonal allergies, stuffiness, exhaustion, a little bit of an achy body. It's not too bad, but I'm tired. And I'm sure I have not taken a COVID test at this point, but I'm sure it's COVID. And so I don't want to get anyone else sick. My wife, we have both had COVID before, so it's not a guarantee that we'll have symptoms or feel knocked out if we're exposed to it. And so my wife doesn't have any symptoms at this point, and she's had it a few times herself, and she's taken it like a champ. In fact, the last time she tested positive, we had no symptoms. Okay, so she's going to take him to the pediatrician at 4 o'clock. She gets home around 3, and I'm just wiped out. I'm tired. I want to go to sleep. She's going to take him to the pediatrician. At this point, his fever is going down. So already this bell curve of him showing to be a little warm, I'd call around 10 a.m., having maybe peak fever around 1 p.m. By 3 o'clock, he's already coming back down. The baby Tylenol, I'm guessing, is probably what helped on that. She takes him to the pediatrician at 4 o'clock. They do some tests. In fact, one of the reasons I'm not usually one of these guys that rushes the baby to the hospital. My wife is more of that, but we actually had a pediatrician, a standing normal pediatrician appointment like the following week. So 8 or 9 days. So the nice thing is I just thought, all right, get this checked out, see if we need to do anything. but they can get the regular appointment done anyway, which is what they plan to do and were able to do. So at 4 o'clock, they do the stuff, they take the test. She comes back home and tells me that 1, when they tested him, he does have COVID. 2, when they took his temperature, he no longer has hay fever. So again, maybe that's the baby Tylenol. And their instructions were to hydrate and give baby Tylenol if fussy. I think no more-ish than 2 milliliters if we have to do that. All right. He's just tired. I think he's feeling okay because the baby Tylenol is still fussy a little bit, but he's sleeping a lot. So that actually makes it a lot easier. He goes to bed pretty early. Now we're into day 3. Now, on day 3, he wakes up at the normal time. And when I take him out of the crib, he actually eats fairly close to normal, most I can tell. And he is toddling and walking around and playing. And he's back into his normal routine for the most part. However, what I have noticed is that he's not crying or fussing, but he is sleeping more than normal. And not what I would say more frequently, but he is showing like his sleepy eyes, the rubbing the eyes, or laying down on the ground and being a little lethargic earlier than he would have been. So normally, like I said, if he'd go down for his nap at 11, I'm seeing him do that around 10 o'clock. And if I put him down at 11, he sleeps for maybe 2.5 hours. But I'm putting him down at 10 o'clock and he's sleeping for 3.5, maybe almost 4 hours. What I think is going on is he's just worn out. COVID is just taking its toll, like it's did on me, and you just feel tired and you're just sleeping it off. But he's much improved on day 3, which is amazing because from day 1, very small symptoms, day 2, kind of more acute symptoms, day 3, I already feel like we're on the back end of that bell curve, which is unbelievable to me because really in a 24-hour period, somehow, at least to me, between his body and the Tylenol, he's through the woods on it. Pretty amazing. All right. Day 4. He is now back to normal for the most part. I can't really tell much other than he is crying after napping a little bit, which is a little unusual. He doesn't feel hot, but I'm expecting that there's maybe some body pains. I've got some body aches at this point too. So I'm on some Advil because especially my legs, for whatever reason, for a couple days, it just felt like I had walked 50 miles and my legs were fatigued and burning and prickly and hot. And so I feel like he had the same thing. I give him another 1.5 milliliters between 1 and 1.5 milliliters of Tylenol. He eats a small lunch. He is pretty normal the rest of the day. I don't know if he has any balance or weak muscle aches or something like that, but he does seem to stumble a lot. I mean, he's only toddling right now, so he tends to fall on his butt a lot, but there were just a lot I found, like where he'd just stand there and then kind of squat and sit down, collapse onto his butt. I'm not saying that's abnormal. I was just trying to watch and see, hey, does he have the same amount of energy? All right, so that's day 4, pretty much normal. The sleep schedule is pretty normal, maybe a little extra sleep still, and he is on the last of the Tylenol. So on day 5, everything now is back to normal, okay? It feels like we're back to the routine. He hasn't fussed, no temperature, no Tylenol, but he is sleeping more, okay? So what I would say is, just like I said, instead of a 2.5-hour nap, he's still on a 3.5-hour nap. I've also noticed that in the afternoon around 3 or 4, he usually doesn't nap. So he usually goes from the afternoon nap all the way to 7:30, 8 o'clock at night when he goes to bed. But around 3 or 4, he's able to take another hour to 90-minute nap. And so, again, I think it's just his body gets worn out, recovering, and he needs some extra sleep. But I would say that he's getting maybe 2 more hours of sleep a day on this particular day, 2 or 2.5 more hours. So it's not a ton. You're not sleeping the whole day away. And I bring that up because there were probably a couple days when I had COVID and I probably slept 16 hours that day. I wasn't like in pain or flu-like symptoms, but man, I was just worn. Okay. The other thing I'm going to say here is that he hasn't really been congested. He hasn't had like a runny nose per se or anything like that. But at this point on day 5, he is showing just maybe a little bit of nasal drippage or sounding just a little bit congested. Like he's got the occasional cough, especially like around food time. I've noticed that. Okay. So now on day 6, I would call him 95% back to normal. If he sleeps a little long, maybe it's like 10, 15 minutes now. And that is pretty close to being back on track. Day 6, I almost felt like I would give you this report because there would be nothing else to report. I felt, 95% of the way there, no visible outward signs, but I'm not. I got a couple more days of reports here to give you. So on day 7, I feel like he's 99% back to normal, but he's now got a little occasional cough. Not like every hour, definitely not even that, but maybe a couple times in the morning, a couple times in the afternoon, like a little cough, and I've noticed a little bit of a runny nose. I've noticed that he is picking his nose a little bit because I think he's got some little boogers. It seems like he's a little congested. There's some mucus there, and we don't do anything about it, but we are giving him baths every day now. There were a couple times when he was so tired, I didn't want to have him fuss with a bath, so giving him a bath, maybe just being careful with that warm water, making sure that it's nice and warm, just try to decongest him. I actually had some of the Vicks Vapo rub out. I thought maybe we would try some of that. We never tried that. But on day 8, he was showing no signs. So he's not coughing. He doesn't seem to be particularly stuffy. He's not congested at all. He is sleeping back on his schedule, which is pretty amazing. I thought he would be so screwed up from the sleep schedule from the previous 7 days of kind of all these adjustments and napping randomly and all these other things that it would be a while just to get him back onto a normal sleep schedule, but he's on the same sleep schedule, same food schedule, and he seems to be just fine. In fact, I used to being able to put him down like an hour earlier for bed and him just going to sleep, but he wants none of that. He wants to go to bed when he was going to bed, which is like the 45 minutes later, which fine, but there were some times it was nice to be able to get 45 minutes of quiet time back. So no symptoms at all by day 8. Day 9, day 10, again, no signs, no symptoms. Couldn't tell he even had it. In fact, we had a neighbor that dropped off some toys and some of these like dried fruit pops that are supposed to soothe your throat and minimize coughing for toddlers. And I gave them to him because he loves them, but we gave them to him after all of this went down and never even needed that. So I felt bad because obviously some of the people that hear what's going on want to know, want to do something. And I feel like it started and was gone for him so quickly, there was nothing to do. So by the time, like I said, the people dropped off their care packages, he was deep on the far side of that bell curve, just already feeling better. And honestly, probably couldn't tell anything. So I would say day 1, a little achy. Day 2 was the worst with a little spike in temperature that started mid-morning, but was gone by late afternoon. And then day 3, back to toddling and stuff, but then it took a couple more days to work it out. I think go back from sleeping half of the day to sleeping a quarter of the day or a third of the day. So I just wanted to give you that story. So we are back to normal. He's a happy little kid again. And as far as you could tell, nothing happened. So I was actually worried about it, and I wasn't overly worried about it. I watched the data, but on an individual level, that doesn't really necessarily mean anything. But yes, he was able to shake it off very quickly. In fact, obviously I had COVID during this same period. And again, my symptoms were never super bad. I had congestion. I had achy body. And I would say I had a very similar situation to what he did. There was a day I felt like I had an elevated temperature. I took my temperatures. I didn't. So I must have just had the hot feels, like the cold sweats deal. But I would say, if anything, the fact that he got through that in 36 hours, I'm going to really say that it was really more of like a 36-hour situation for him. It just was tripled for me. So instead of 1.5 days, I had 5 or 6 days where I just felt like I was recovering. I feel perfectly fine now. I actually have a little bit of a raspy voice because there's just a little bit of this lingering like congestion, I don't know, postnasal drip or something, which is just working its way through. It's hard to shake. No matter what happens, seasonal allergies, it always takes me a while to get rid of that. And then that makes me maybe a little more tired too, but I never felt bad. But it did knock me down, like in terms of exhaustion and endurance and stamina for probably 8 or 9 days. I was up doing work and stuff like that. But there were times when I was working, and then by lunchtime, I was like, I got to go get a nap. I got to go grab a nap. And it was a 3-hour nap. Kudos to kids, man, for having high metabolism and strong immune systems, fast immune systems. But I just wanted to share what ended up happening with Theo while he did get at least our first documented of COVID for him. So I expect him to get it again or another strain or whatever, or many times in his life, whatever it might be. But if you have someone that is 15 months old as well, or someone in that ballpark, and just curious to what's going to happen or how to maneuver through it, I would certainly make sure that you're comfortable with your process. See your doctor, see a medical professionals, find a professional in this space to give you specific guidance. Don't listen to me or base any of your decisions on my experiences here, but that's what happened here in this household, and I was relatively pleased by it. To me, I like the fact that he didn't take a lot of medication. I don't like taking medication unless I absolutely have to. I take more of it now that I'm at of a certain age. Sometimes it's just not fun to ice your legs. You just want to take an Advil and go to bed. But I wanted him really to have his immune system do its thing on COVID as much as possible so that he's just kind of more equipped moving forward. That natural immunity and the body knowing to produce its own antibodies, that was something that if he did catch it and was able to fight it, I wanted him to do that as much as possible without making him totally uncomfortable. So I think the Tylenol helped as well. But have a bottle of baby Tylenol on hand as well. But I'll put a link to that in the description. But hopefully, if your kid or kids have COVID as well, that I am hoping that their experience is as insignificant and hopefully a quick recovery like mine was. All right, that's it. Peter Von Panda out.